welcome to another war game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we are taking a look at YAAH magazine. This is issue
Number 9.
This is from May 2017. This is a little bit of an older, I think they've had like 2 or 3 issues since then.
Yeah, at least.
And magazine's great. Read the magazine. Ton of great articles in it. But this is a review of the game that came in this, which is Donetsk, Battle for the Airport. And this is a modern conflict just from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago.
Where it was Ukrainian rebels backed by Russian forces, and there was a few different battles for the control of the Donetsk airport with Ukrainian security forces and the Ukrainian military. So it's a small little game. How many counters? Not that many?
I would say each side had about 20.
Yeah, 25 counters on each side. And there's a couple we didn't use. I think there's 3 or 4 scenarios. There's like the first battle, the rebels kind of came in, and they're trying to cling on. They don't have particularly strong forces, and the Ukrainians come and smash them. And then the second battle is the rebels come back with Russian supplied T-72s and T-64s, and they kind of roll in, furious fighting. And there's a couple other scenarios where, I mean, you have like heavy air support, so you have kind of fighter jets and attack helicopters coming in with air support as well. In different
Your missiles
situations.
were really good, though. Dang, those things were amazing.
When they hit, they're very good.
Yeah,
they have kind of a higher delay and miss chance though.
Yeah.
But it's a small map. It's a very tight game. There's not really a lot of space to kind of do big maneuvers and things like that. But the space that is there is very, very important. Basically, half the map is the airport, and then there's kind of some surrounding town, forests, and like a small river, basically. And it is, in this scenario that we did, rebels are just trying to move into the airport and capture it, basically.
Yep. Hold 8 buildings by the end of round 5?
Round 8.
8.
So you got 8 turns out of a maximum of like 12, some of the longer scenarios. You get 8 turns just to move in and hold 8 building hexes that are within the airport, within the kind of set parameters. So,
and there's about 30 buildings for you to choose from, really.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
it's a lot of hexes. So for the Ukrainian player, in this scenario, it's set up a defensive perimeter and pick a couple really key points where you might want to invest a bit more in your defensive line, and that's a huge part of this game. It's the Ukrainian player sets up first. And it's on them to just kind of set up deploy all their units, and then kind of the rebel players puts everything on this one line of the board, and then they have to kind of move it and attack based on kind of what they see. So what are your kind of thoughts on this one?
I think there's a lot of very interesting elements to this one. The hard target versus soft target distinction, very, very important. Obviously, tanks firing against tanks are better than infantry firing at tanks.
Yes.
So that was a very interesting distinction that you had to plan for and be ready for.
And tanks firing at infantry, not necessarily optimal either.
No. What was their value firing? Yeah, they're only an 8 against
8
infantry.
Is still good,
yeah.
But it's not nearly.
Yeah, in this game, that's good, but not really good. The 14 for that T-72, that's a really good value.
Yeah, he's
firing against another tank.
Yeah, or shooting at the BTRs, just blowing them away, not even close.
So it's really about planning, how am I going to build a cohesive team to deal with all the threats that are possible, particularly for the Ukrainians because you set up first.
Yes.
Now, the Ukrainians, the thing I did like about them is they had the BTR-80s, the armored personnel carriers. I think they had 4 of them. 1, 2... I think they had 4. And they could kind of go back and forth to plug holes as they appeared. So that was really important to think about.
Yeah, you could load a guy in, drive 8 spaces, 7 spaces, and then drop a guy off.
When a leg unit can only move 2 spaces.
Yeah.
So it allowed me I kept those BTRs really close, and a couple times I'm like, oh, okay, he's set up this way, I have to kind of move guys over there. So that was interesting. Proper use of your fire support, I think, is very, very key. I had 4 total shots with my howitzers.
Did you have 4?
I think I had 4. You had 5.
I had 3 rockets and 3 howitzers.
You had 6.
So I had a little bit more too.
But you gotta pick targets. the soft versus hard is another distinction that you got to be aware of with that. And
Yeah.
then you roll a die, anything 5 or under, I think they hit.
Yeah, they come on time, then you roll another die,
Right.
then they hit properly.
Right.
And then you kind of roll attacks. If you roll that first die roll, if you roll a 6,
It's delayed.
It doesn't come in time, and it goes
Yeah.
off next round.
So then you're able to kind of move away. Then your only hope is to roll, I think, a 6 on the scatter.
Yeah, so then you're kind of hoping to miss.
Yeah.
So you're trying to roll badly on your to hit, because then you roll on a scatter table.
And you
to
can
see-
catch up to guys that have run away.
And that's
Very
it's
rare,
likely.
yeah.
There's some odds there, but yeah. There's a little bit of kind of gaminess there.
Yeah. And also like the initiative system, it really, you had the initiative, you had the higher, what do they call that, initiative level.
So I started at 11 and you had 10 to
Yep.
start with.
Yeah.
And the initiative is not only who goes first, but it's a measure of your fighting desire, your capacity
You
to
give
fight.
up when it's, I think, at a 4. I think my threshold was a 4.
You don't give. Well, yeah, you don't. You stop going on the offensive.
Right.
But every time you have a unit eliminated, your initiative goes
Drops.
down.
Yeah.
And how you decide initiative is your initiative level plus a d4. So yeah, there's a little bit you can roll a die there, but a d4 is not a lot in the context of this game. It can go one way or the other, and if you can get ahead of someone, eliminate a couple of their units,
Yeah, it really
you're
makes...
in a pretty good spot to say, I'm going to go first. Then you can be a bit more risky. I'll move my tank out into the open, which is what I did, and I know I'm going to go first next round.
So you know you're going to shoot, so you can
unload.
shoot. And that was an interesting thing, because I was trying desperately to move my units, and you were doing the same thing. It's like you're trying to game the other player by moving one unit here, because you do an alternating impulse, and you move one unit, and then he moves a unit. So what I was hoping to do is you would move stacks, and I think early on, I moved a couple stacks.
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, I'm going to break my guys up. And
I get more activations that way.
so that was an interesting kind of gaming that the other player, trying to understand how can I eventually keep my prime units open and available for attack when you run out of activations. But that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But I liked that element too. I thought that was kind of a fun part of the design.
Yes, this game provided, in a really small game, kind of all of the nuances that you would expect from a tactical game, in the sense that terrain is really important. Literally, the number of activations you have can be really important, and your initiative incredibly important. And in tactical games, you get that I'm trying to game you as well as the game to be able to put myself in advantageous positions.
Right.
The other really cool part I thought is terrain's terrain, right? You get defensive bonuses from the woods, from buildings, different bits and pieces. But you have a different terrain modifier and different movement modifiers for those kind of the vehicle units.
Mm-hmm.
So a tank doesn't get as good a bonus from an urban area as men do. Men hide in the buildings. Tank's still on the street, right?
For example, the built up, which is kind of the buildings, in essence, leg units get a 4 bonus,
Which is huge.
Yeah, and the tanks or vehicles get a 2.
Yeah.
So still a good
Still good.
bonus, but man, for leg units, you want to get snugged up in those buildings.
Yeah.
Your defense is typically somewhere between a 4 and a 6,
Yeah.
6 for leaders. So you add those 4 from those buildings, an 8 is very difficult to hit. And the system, it takes the attacking value minus the defensive value and comes up with an overall modifier.
Yeah, it comes up, and the net difference between those is the column on which you roll on the combat results table. Roll 2d6, you're trying to roll low.
Right.
Based on which column you're on.
So if you're a 12 attacking a 10, 12 minus 10 is 2, you're going to roll on that +2 column, which is pretty good. You're going to do something on a roll on 2d6 of 9 or less.
Yeah.
Most of my attacks ended up being on the -3, -4 column, so I wasn't going to do anything unless I rolled a 5 or a 4 or less.
Yeah.
So I liked that. I thought it worked. It's a matter of gaming the terrain to your advantage. And that's something I don't know that I did very well. You ended up taking a lot of buildings very quickly, and I think I just set up wrong. That was something I would like to redo and replay that. But overall, neat system.
Yeah, it's a cool little game. The one thing that I know you talked about, there's no assaults, there's no melee.
Yeah, I wanted melee.
Right? There's no extra rules for that.
I wanted melee.
But how they model that is that
Reactionary fire.
If I move into a hex with an enemy unit, they get a free attack.
Yeah.
And if I move out of that hex, they get another free attack.
Yeah.
So it's that extra volume of attacks.
Yeah.
That's kind of the melee.
Can make a little bit of a difference. The other thing I thought was neat is you do have leaders. I think I had like 3 leaders, and I think you had 4. But a leader, you can stack that with a unit or a stack of units. You can create a fire team or a fire group, adding everyone's abilities together, including support weapons, and make one big attack. But if you do that, the snipers come in.
Yeah, if you roll poorly.
If you roll poorly, if you roll a 11 or a 12.
Yeah, if you have a leader.
We never had that
plus
happen.
At least 2 units.
Right.
And you roll an 11 or a 12, which is terrible. Probably that's a bad roll.
You deserve to
You're not
have some
going to do
negative
well.
effect.
But a sniper's going to go off. And he might
kill one of your guys.
He reduces your lead.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's just, it's you don't have sniper counters anywhere on the board.
No.
It's just, it's like a...
Yeah.
What would you call that? It's an abstraction of opportunistic fire from individual guys.
The idea is you have a group of soldiers with a leader standing together, making a fire attack, and they're shooting at the guy that looks like a leader. Basically, is what that mimics.
Or it's you have one dude laying on a roof and he's the sniper, but it's too small of a scale to like model him individually. You don't need a sniper counter for that. It's very rare that would come up, but it's still there.
Most units were 2 reduction units. I think almost every one of them, except for some of the heavy machine gun and the tanks.
The tanks.
Tanks and vehicles were 1 shots.
Yeah.
So if they get destroyed, they're done. They get a reduction, they're done. So I think that was evened out because there's a lot of leg units, and they don't do very well against tanks.
No.
You got to roll basically a 2 or a 3 to do anything to a tank, and that makes perfect sense.
You had a few BTRs and 1 tank, and I had 2 tanks in this scenario.
Yep. And you had a big recoilless rifle, but I had some RPGs. So
and I had a couple of those too.
I feel like they tried to even that out from the OB. And I think they did a decent job. I think this is a very interesting game. It plays fairly quickly. We played it in about an hour.
Yeah.
Now that we know it, I think we could probably play it in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it's really only 8 turns. It's this scenario. Sorry, there were some others.
But I think the longest one is 12 scenario.
Okay.
Which...
that would be an hour and a half.
The amount of extra units in the bag that we didn't use is about...
You had some Spetsnaz.
Yeah, I had Spetsnaz, and you had some more BTRs, a leader.
What was the Spetsnaz values? I didn't look at those.
It doesn't have them, I don't think.
So they just have a special...
Counter. Yeah, it's a...
Yeah, we didn't look at that.
No, it has its own little rule.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But yeah, I think overall, for a magazine game, this is a very, very good game.
Yeah, right. It's
plays quick, good rules. Rules were fairly understandable.
And when you buy a magazine, I don't know how people buy them. Do you buy the magazine for the game, or do you buy the magazine and you get a game with it, right?
Frankly, I would think people buy it for the game, and then the rest of the articles are just bonus. But I don't know. That's me.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've read most of these magazines that we've received, but I think I go for them for the game. The games. Now, there are some, I'm going to be honest, there's some I go for the articles probably a little more than the game.
So it's dependent on me, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them I'm like, ooh. So the C3I that had Plant Orange in it, I bought that for the game.
Right.
The magazine could have been
trash.
I never looked at it, right?
Yeah.
I did read it, but and you bought
C3I number 31 because it had this scenario for liberty or death.
Was that the one that also had South Pacific?
Yes. So I bought that one for
you're buying that for
that specific purpose.
Yeah. And you get a bonus magazine.
And the magazine's really good, but I really bought it for those 2 games. Because I love Liberty or Death from GMT Games, and we love Empire of the Sun, and that South Pacific was a variant of that. So that while we're talking about the magazine...
But some of these, I'm like... I really like the magazine. Didn't really know anything about the game.
Right.
I'm buying it for the magazine because it's a great magazine.
Right.
And it happens to come with a cool game.
I do know in the past 2 years, YAAH has had... Herman Luttman had a game. I think it was called 19... was it 1914 Race to the Sea? It's basically the opening movements of World War One.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, 1914 Race to the Sea. You thought it was Dunkirk. I don't think it was Dunkirk.
I only said that because I only ever read the title.
Right, it was World War One. We have never played that yet. I've trimmed it. I've clipped the counters. I read the rules. We just have never played it yet. But that was one. I think the game was really interesting to me because we like Herman Luttman designs.
Yes.
Now this one, no offense to the title or the subject. What was it, Ryan Kirk? I don't know that I would have bought this one for the game. There's some good articles about Comancheria, one of my favorite solo games. 13 Days, and what else is in there? Conan, 65. There's a scenario in there.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing because YAAH magazine, is it published by Flying Pig?
It is. Yep.
So they have bonus scenarios for their
games typically.
So that is really cool. And I imagine in future issues you'll get scenarios for OST, for Platoon Commander Deluxe, and you get one scenario for like
There's
2 or 3 of their
games.
games.
A Night of Man solo scenario they have in there.
Which
That's one of their games. Talk about, you read the editor's Zone of Control.
Yeah.
Which was pretty interesting.
Mark Walker, he's the guy who doesn't mince his words. And his little editorial on this one, I was just reading it, and it was just interesting. Because he's saying, like, he's talking about the magazine, the publication itself. Because the YAAH magazines, it's a war game magazine, right?
Right.
But there's stuff in there that isn't necessarily like Hex Encounter war games. There's a review in this one for The Others by Cool Mini or Not.
Yeah.
13 Days. Not really a war game. Conan, which is a miniature.
We love
huge miniature.
Conan.
And he was talking about, he's like, yeah, I love war games. He owns a wargaming company.
Yeah.
Not the first one he's owned either. And he makes those. Obviously, he loves those, but he plays other games as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, love Imperial Assault, love Warhammer 40k, or the Conquest, I think is what it was.
Okay.
And he's like, so you're going to get reviews of these other games which aren't Hex Encounter games. And he was just like, basically you can suck it up. Like, you will get reviews of things that might not be right up your alley.
Yeah.
But I think variety is the spice of life.
Agreed. Well, and that's the way I think that's the way we attack our games. We love war games.
Yes.
I love CDGs. I love weird war games. We played some mini World War II. Not a classic war game, but it's a war game. Yeah. And I really liked that. I love those kind of games.
And I would say I like conflict games.
You do. You love miniature skirmish.
Have to be
a war game. No.
But if I'm going to play like a regular board game, it better have some interactions with conflict in it.
We like Kemet and Cyclades.
Blood Rage.
We love Blood Rage.
And those games are like trashy and corny.
Yeah, you roll a bunch of dice, you have some cool minis, but there's still...
But I like the conflict and interaction. When I sit down at a table with someone, that's what I want. And Mark just alludes to, he's like, you're going to get games in here that aren't just, dusty Hex Encounter war games. You'll get other stuff in it. And
they do that.
It's a credit to YAAH Magazine for putting something else out there as well, which is nice.
I think most of the other war game magazines that we're familiar with, I think they really just focus on war games, right?
I think so.
Battle Magazine.
Battles Magazine did have some other games.
Did it have some? I haven't read my copy yet. We just got them.
But that magazine is huge.
Yeah,
it's very thin paper. There's a lot in it.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of war games, and there's like a couple of other games.
Yeah.
This is kind of a bit more of a bumper magazine almost.
Okay.
Like the paper's pretty thick. It's actually really nice.
Yeah. Oh, Battle Magazine, you mean?
No, this one.
These are thicker sheets.
Yeah, that one's kind of a
little less in there. Yep.
Right. So it's fewer pages, but it's probably a bit sturdier quality from a paper standpoint.
Right.
So there's just fewer pages in it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you get the distribution of those reviews is a bit more 50-50, 60-40 than some of the other ones. But
well, one other thing I love about these magazines, and I think we're going to do a video on comparing these magazines.
Yeah.
You've talked about doing that.
Yes.
You'll probably do that. But I like to look through these because they always have some interesting game that I'm not aware of.
Yes.
One I found in this issue was Hands in the Sea, which is a First Punic War deck building game. And I'm like, this looks really interesting. I'm going to have to do some research on this now and really understand, is that a game that I want to try to get my hands on.
And it's a magazine, right? There's a ton of that kind of stuff in them, right?
Yeah.
There's always advertising and things like that, but it's just another resource for reading about the games. I like reading about the games that I already like. Mm-hmm. I like to have my opinions reinforced,
validated.
Yes.
Yeah,
but it's also interesting. Oh, I learned tidbits about the game or the design.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's shed some light on something I didn't know about that. Also fascinating. But learning about new games is fantastic.
Yeah.
So just it's not just a little game. There's a ton of history in this as well.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of pages before the rules about
this conflict,
about the conflict, and why it was really important. This is a very recent incident, historically speaking, at least.
Yep.
And I watched off of it on the news. I like urban conflict. I think it's always fascinating to game that, and so that's why. Because you have a bunch of these, and I was like, I want to play that one.
Yeah.
Because this is something that appeals to me.
Yep.
And it's modern. Modern is also something interesting. We don't do a lot of modern wargaming.
No.
But it's also real. It's real modern.
Yep.
I don't,
Agree. Real modern as in just a couple of years ago.
Right. And it's not
2-3 years ago.
It's not like 1985 World War III.
Right.
That's not as appealing to me.
Well, 1985 was, 25 years ago.
Right.
It's a long time ago.
But that's considered modern.
Yeah, I know.
And people love that
it's
stuff.
still a long time ago, though.
Duking it out in
Cold War,
in Germany.
hot stuff.
But like stuff that's tangible and real, always fascinating to me because I like the real history of it.
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting. So, neat little game. It's a tight one. Excellent solo game. No reason why you couldn't do it solo, just playing both sides. And then you get a great magazine along with it. So, I'll show you a little bit of the board, and then we'll just wrap up with a couple final thoughts here. So here's a look at the map, and this is Donetsk Airport. It's modeled after real kind of images and the layout. So you have kind of some town down here. There's some wooded area with a stream, kind of an impassable lake in the middle. The stream goes this way. Crossed over by some roads which have bridges, some more urban area, more trees, and then you've got the main kind of this is where we're getting at. This is the action area, and you have some buildings. You have like a little, I don't know if this is a little metro hotel kind of area, a little Toyota symbol, presumably car rental, things like that. And then you have, this is the huge parking garage, which is multi-level. Then you have the new terminal and the old terminal. Again, these are multi-level buildings. That's what these, I don't know if you can see this. It's kind of dots in the middle of hexes. These have little red triangles. That means they're multi-level. And the other one is the kind of the control tower over here. Also a multi-level building, but it's just one hex. Outside of that, a lot of tarmac, and then you've got the runways over here as well. So the main kind of part of the action is either side trying to capture or conversely defend the airport. A lot of the terrain here is just how to approach the airport and get the most out of your approach vectors, how you're getting there. As you can see here, this is kind of halfway through one of our scenarios. Well, this was kind of towards the end. I had my main bulk of my forces with my armed, my armor, my tanks, my BTRs coming out this way, along with some of my troops. But then I had a major foot element, with a couple of big stacks of guys with leaders coming up from kind of down here, through this forest, swinging around into this part of the airport. So I was kind of going for this pincer maneuver, but they started kind of here. So Grant was unsure at first of where to divert his forces, because in this one, the Ukrainian player set up first, so he makes kind of a line of troops kind of defensively in the airport. The rebel player, the Reds, are trying to move in and capture 8 spaces within the airport, basically within this area. So he sets up decently, but there is a lot of onus on the defender to set up well. So the first play of this, you might get rolled as the defender, because if you set up poorly or, even suboptimally, it's possible you'll get kind of a hole punctured through, and it's once you start getting a lot of guys in and spread across buildings, it can be very difficult to get them out, to clear them out in large numbers at least, because the buildings offer a lot of defensive modifiers for either side, and once you're in that kind of good terrain, getting out very, very tough. So that's kind of, setup is an important one. So you play this, you might botch it, play it again, you'll have a much better idea of how to do that and do that well. That's something that we kind of figured out pretty early on in this game. But like I said, I set up, it was kind of like forces here, 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 and here is generally what I was going with. So he knew I was probably going to do it on two kind of fronts, because this is impassable, this lake in the middle. So he had them spread out decently. I moved up these forces. This is where I put my two tanks. I had a T64 and a T72, as well as some stacks of infantry with recoilless rifles, heavy machine guns, and things like that. And so, kind of moved up here. There's this pretty decently clear terrain, at least for firing across. This is a graveyard. You can shoot across it, but moving across it's difficult. And swinging up around here, I was able to draw forces over this way, and that's how I had just foot soldiers. I swung them out this way quickly and brought them up here, and by which time his forces were in a little bit of, I won't say disarray, but I laid some smoke markers down with my off-board howitzers and was able to kind of puncture through, by which point I've been able to make some successful maneuvers over here and do some good damage. But that's a lot of what this game is. It's tactical in scale, and it is tactical in nature. You do have to pay attention. Terrain is really important in this. The initiative is also important. Being able to kind of move first, you get yourself into a good position, and then being able to make that first shot, that little big killer, and set up the rest of the turn, very important. So that aspect of the tactical game is in this. Even though the rules are very simple and it's like 6 or 8 pages at most, you get actually a decent amount of crunch from the numbers of the different values, the hard and soft targeting. There's actually a lot of stuff that is excellent, what you'd expect from a good tactical game, in a really tight package here. But go back to this initiative track down here, that's what this is here. So it's a turn marker and also a game records track. So we're tracking our various different off-board assets. You have like 3 howitzer strikes, so you just count down to 3 when you use them. But the initiative, basically the game scenario says the Ukrainians start with a 10 initiative and the rebels start with an 11 initiative, at least in this scenario. And these have a reverse side that says hesitated. And basically there's another value that says when you get down to 4 initiative, you flip to this hesitated side. Basically, you haven't lost the game yet, but your will to go on the offensive is broken because of casualties, battlefield confusion, breakdown of the chain of command. Is what it's what it represents. But the reality is this is tracked by losses. That's how you really affect that. So the more losses you take, the more your initiative goes down, and eventually you get to this hesitated state. And after this, you start being able to go on the offensive. You can just kind of hunker down and defend. So if you're in a good defensive posture, you might be able to hang on and win the game. If this is happening later on in the game, you can claw on to a victory that way, or hang on for a draw, that kind of thing. And then it goes down. If you ever get this down to 0, you lose the game. You are shattered in that sense. But this is really cool because this is the value 11 and a 10. But for initiative, you roll a d4 each. That was a 2, and you add it to this. So it's mostly gonna stay like this. But if the Ukrainian player rolled a 4 and I rolled a 1, they would have the initiative. It is possible to overcome that. And then so the onus really is important to not just wound and reduce guys, but if you can eliminate them, if I kill a guy, my initiative goes down. And so if you can kill a couple of guys, their initiative goes down, suddenly you're on the front foot for that, just that edge in going first, being able to make that one extra really, really opportune move. And that came to fruition in this game. I'd swung my T-72 around this way, and I just kind of parked here, ready for the next turn. This guy tried to attack me. Infantry against tanks, not particularly effective. He brought up his T-64 and had a pot shot at me, not very good. But this is basically a standoff. I'm in open terrain, but I knew at that point of the game I had a good, like a 3 advantage in the initiative. So there's basically no way that I could have lost the initiative. If we'd have tied, it would have gone to him. But, you know, the odds of that are pretty slim. Using the initiative, I was able to go first, make this shot, and I pinned his tank so his tank couldn't attack me. I was in a pretty disadvantageous defensive position there. But I can pin him here, and that basically means he can't shoot back or attack. He can kind of run away, but that's all he can do. And that kind of, those little nuances that come out from this initiative track, as well as your tactical positioning and things, you can play a little gamble like that. If you've got it set up and you've taken a few losses, it can really affect the game, and you can use that and really press your advantage that way. With this tank knocked out, I'm not so worried about these BTRs here. I can kind of run my tank up here, start knocking those guys out, because his huge, I don't know if it's 120, 150, 55 millimeter cannon out of action, basically. There's a lot of cool little bits and pieces here that makes it an enjoyable tactical game, but it's small, it's really tight, the action's quite focused. The first turn or two were a lot of me moving up and trying to position that. So the first 2 turns it was kind of slow, but once you get into the action, it's pretty furious. Guys get knocked out pretty quickly, but it's about movement, and defensive terrain is a huge focus on this game. If you can get those extra couple of moves that are opportune, you can infiltrate an area and get into some terrain, you can really be a thorn in someone's side, because it's very difficult to get someone out of a building. How combat works is quite simply, like the infantry, he has this, I'll just kind of show you here. The infantry has a couple of different icons on him here. So bottom left-hand corner, he has a 2/6. The 2 is his fire value against a hard target. So he's got a 2 firepower against a tank or an APC. That's terrible. He's got a 6 firepower against other infantry or a heavy machine gun or a leader. A soft target is what they're called. And that 3 in the middle is its range, and the 4 on the right, bottom right-hand corner is its defensive value, and then the top right is its movement factor. Infantry have a movement of 2, also not very good. So normally it's as simple as, if we're kind of out in the open over here and we have an enemy infantry out in the open, we're shooting at each other. He's a soft target, so I have a 6 attack value, he has a 4 defensive value. You look at the play aid sheet, which is printed on the back of the magazine. 6 minus 4, so you do attacker minus defender, gives you a +2. That's the column that we're rolling on here, is this +2 value. We roll 2d6, we got a little player's aid dice. Those don't come with the game, sorry. You roll them, and you're trying to roll low. So a 10 is terrible, it's a miss. If you roll those sweet snake eyes though, you're going to do a reduction. You're going to do a reduction of anything on a 6 or less. On a 9 or less, you're going to pin them. Pinning means you get the little pin marker out, and they are pinned. It means they can't attack this turn, and if they do move, they have to kind of move away from the enemy, basically. They can't go on the offensive in any way or get into line of sight of an enemy if they're already not. But they can try and move further away. That's something that they can do. So that's very basic, right? No modifiers there. Now the difference is that if I'm in a defensive terrain and he's attacking me, you add the defensive terrain modifier. Well, we go back up here. I'm in the woods. Woods gives a 2 terrain effects modifier on defense to foot units. Woods also provides a 2 for vehicles. Now, what's interesting is when you get into built up, basically any buildings, it's a 4 defensive modifier for dudes, because dudes can go and hide in the buildings. It's only a 2 for vehicles. Or, quite conversely, graveyard. So this graveyard in here, fascinating piece of terrain. Gives defensive modifiers for infantry, literally running and hiding behind headstones, but tanks driving through, no modifiers for them. So there's some really interesting, nuanced stuff here. When you start getting into these really big buildings, like the terminal and this kind of parking garage, the defensive modifier is a 6, because these are big, complex concrete buildings with lots of places to hide, and this is a tactical level game. So you've got a squad of dudes, kind of in the parking garage. The defensive modifier is a 4, plus 6 is a 10. I mean, you have to start combining fire. And you can do that when you have leaders, right? So if I've got an infantry which has a 6, a militia which has a 4, and my leader which has a 1, I'm shooting 11 into this guy who's a 4 plus 6 is a 10. All of this firepower against one puny infantry unit, and I'm only just on this +1 table. If you have anything less than that, so if we take out the militia, I'm firing 7 into a 10, well, then you're on the -3 table. And all of a sudden, you almost may as well not be making the attack, because the odds get so slim. And if they've already activated, pinning them frank basically does nothing. Because, pinning basically prevents you from doing stuff when they activate. Well, if they've already activated, or if it's later on in the turn, you're not that worried about it. Oh, they're pinned for a little bit. The pinning goes away at the beginning of next turn. So there's some really, really interesting choices to be made. This is a tight little game. As you can see, frankly, this is basically all of the pieces. There's a few extra in a bag for different scenarios. There's some markers for like Overwatch, going into upper levels of these buildings, some different bits and pieces, doing your off-board artillery, which is, I choose to do it here, and does it come in on time? It might be delayed and come in next round, which sucks. And then, will it hit or will it move? And then how effective is it? You start making some attacks, basically. But that's a lot of what this game is. It's a small little tactical game. Urban combat, very tight. Great solo game. Just play both sides kind of to your best of your ability. And that's basically it. The rules, not bad. I think the rules were what? Those are scenarios there. How many scenarios are there? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's 4 scenarios, which is really nice. 4 scenarios, some game notes in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's not really 7. It's more like 6 pages of rules. 6 pages of rules in the back of this. Play it on the back. And that's it. So what we'll do is wrap up with a few final thoughts with this one. So that was a look at the board. I had fun with this little game.
Yep.
It's just something to potter around with. Plays quickly.
I had frustrating fun because
Yes.
I did not do very well.
But
my die rolling was terrible, and I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be doing.
and so much of this is set up.
Yes,
I think that's a
agreed.
big part of this game.
Had I set up a little differently,
Yeah.
maybe it would have been different.
And would it have gone better or worse? No, but it would have been entirely different.
Yeah.
So there's actually a decent amount of replay in this. I think there's
Agreed.
4 scenarios in it, which is,
And they're all different.
Who's attacking, who's defending, what your OOB is a little bit different. So there's some decent replay value in a game that comes free with a great magazine. So had a blast with this one. Appreciate you guys tuning in. This has been Donetsk, Battle for the Airport, which you can find in YAAH magazine, issue number 9. And I've been Alexander from Players8.com.
And I'm Grant.